Thank you. Thank you, Chrissy, and good afternoon all. It's fantastic to be here. This is my first opportunity to present at this conference, so it's wonderful to have met some of you so far. We've got a table outside, so hopefully I'll get the opportunity to chat to more of you over the next couple of days. As Chrissy has indicated, BMG is focused on lithium brine in Chile. Now, I've noticed that there's a thematic that's going through this conference in terms of technology. Whilst we're not a technology company directly, we're clearly in the space where mining meets technology. And that's because lithium is really a key component of the battery chemistry, which is an important part of electric vehicles and mobile devices and so forth, which is really undergoing a revolution. And I'm sure everyone's aware of what's happening. You know, we've got Tesla, we've got a lot of players that are becoming very prevalent in the space. But really, this is just the beginning. And it's building momentum, the die is being cast, and metals such as lithium, cobalt, others that make up the battery chemistry in these power units are going to go through a fundamental demand shift over the coming period. So we see this as a fantastic place to be. In terms of why should you consider BMG, after all, this is an investment conference. Really, there's 4 or 5 points that are important in terms of where we sit and why we consider ourselves to be attractive at this point in time. The first is obviously the commodity, lithium. We think that the fundamentals around this metal are strong, and the demand-supply curve looking out will underwrite the value proposition of this metal going forward. In terms of location, brines it's about real estate, and we've heard neurology mentioned in some of the other conversations. That's also relevant to us as well, because we're in probably the best lithium salar on the planet. It's the highest grade, it's pure, the biggest players in the world are there, and we're close by. So we're very encouraged by the opportunity that we have. We have a very strong local partner. For small players moving into a foreign jurisdiction, if you're a BHP or a Rio, you obviously have the infrastructure to bring a big team in and to build out your presence. For smaller guys like ourselves, it's a matter of how do you leverage your way into an opportunity so that you can invest in the value-adding components of that opportunity. So we've chosen to enter Chile through a good local partner. That's given us great access to people, to opportunity, and we think that that'll deliver a lot of value as we move forward. Importantly, we have some very good targets, and we're about to undergo a drilling campaign. In terms of the link to the value upside, currently our market cap is less than $5 million, which when you look at the peers and you look at where these valuations sit once companies move through the exploration side and make discoveries and so forth, there's a strong opportunity here to see a re-rating, and that's very near term. So really that's my pitch to you. We're on the verge of undergoing some activity which should result in a strong re-rating if we're successful, and we think we have a strong basis to be encouraged by what we have. In terms of lithium, it really comes from 2 sources, and I know from the poll this morning that people are reasonably well informed in terms of battery minerals, but essentially it comes from hard rock and it comes from brines. In terms of hard rock, probably half of the world's production in lithium comes from hard rock in WA, and then the balance of the lithium production comes from brines, and really that's predominantly in what they call the lithium triangle, which is in South America, and it takes in Chile, Argentina and Bolivia. And this sort of dotted line you can see running down here is the Andes. And the relevance of that is look, I'm not a technical person, so I won't go too deep into this, but 20, 30 million years ago, there was a whole lot of volcanic activity. and the materials that came from that were lithium rich, and over time they weathered down and they concentrated into sort of low-lying areas, salars or salt lakes, if you like. And then sitting below that is the brine material, which is rich in lithium. Essentially, that's what we're looking to discover, and that's where it comes from. Our key focus initially is, wrong button, back it up, here we go, is in this area here, which is on the edge of the Atacama Salar, which is where SQM and Albemarle are operational, and they're two of the biggest players in the world. They produce a good part of the world's lithium from that salar. The value of that salar is it's probably the best lithium brine address on the planet. So we're excited to have an opportunity in close proximity, which is really the neurology point, but it goes beyond that. There's a lot of ASX and TSX companies that are very active in this region. There have been spectacular gains that have come from these companies over the past few years. We've seen volatility in the space, there's been ups and downs, but fundamentally there's good value that sits in this space. So we're really at the beginning of that journey, but we're about to embark upon our drill program, which is really the first re-rating point. So that's the important thing to emphasise. In terms of process here, I mean, there are advantages of lithium brines versus hard rock. For a small company, the relevance of this slide is really in terms of why we thought brine was attractive for a small company like ours in terms of investment. And that is because it's a fairly simple process in terms of exploration, and the operational side is well understood. So you can get very good leverage in terms of investment, and you can get that quickly. In terms of whether you should look at brine versus hard rock, to be honest, it's largely academic, because if you cast out and you look at the fundamental demand equation as it presents, and we'll have a look at that in a moment, we need lithium from hard rock and from brine. So I mean, depending on where you sit in terms of how you view the rate at which electric vehicles will take hold, the amount of lithium that's required versus production today is probably 4 or 5-fold by 2025. Maybe it's 20-fold by 2030, and it could be 50, 60 times that going out a few years beyond. So there's a tipping point at which the demand side of the equation will really take grasp. There's been a lot that's obviously been discussed about the battery side, but I really just want to emphasise a few points here. In terms of battery chemistry, one of the advantages of lithium is because of where it sits on the periodic table. Essentially, it's the lightest of the metals, and it's of a nature that it easily gives up its electrons, so it's perfect in terms of the electrolyte within a battery unit. Now, in terms of battery chemistry, there's lots of different variants in terms of how much cobalt you might use, whether you use other metals in terms of the anode and the cathode mix. But lithium's really a common component no matter what you do, and that's why they refer to them as the lithium-ion batteries. In terms of the fundamental price drivers, the thing that gives me some confidence in terms of looking out to see, what's the fundamental value proposition in terms of this space. And whilst, we are seeing volatility, and we have seen volatility in the short term, really this EV evolution is driven by a range of external factors which have real teeth. The first is the major economies such as China and the EU, they have emission policies and they have targets that have been laid down in law, which are really driving where automotive manufacturers and consumers are going in terms of what it is that they'll consume, what sort of vehicles they'll drive in the future. And if we look at where the automotive manufacturers are going, there's hundreds of billions of dollars that's been invested in the development of electric and hybrid vehicles. And, manufacturers such as Volvo and others, they've laid down really ambitious targets in terms of where they want their motor vehicle fleet to be in the near term. And it's all driving towards electric and hybrid technologies. And, you know, whilst we see Tesla, who captures a lot of press, and, you know, it's interesting looking at what Elon Musk does from day to day, it won't be Tesla that drives this industry at the end of the day. It'll be the manufacturers that can produce a small Nissan at a price which the average consumer can consume. And McKinsey's have done some work, and they've postulated that once you get to around $100, US $100 per kilowatt hour for a battery unit in terms of cost, that's really the tipping point when the battery-powered vehicles will become cheaper than internal combustion engines. And we're not far away from that. 6 or 7 years ago, it was $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Now it's down around less than $150. So we're getting close. So if we look at where we are and how it is that we're going to play in this space, we've really got 3 opportunities that we're focused on: the Salar West, the Nathalie, and the Pacanales. Salar West is really our priority focus, and we've done some work on that, which I'll step through in a moment. But the important thing is that, as I've mentioned, it's located in the best lithium salar on the planet. And you can see these areas here. This is where SQM and Albemarle are operational. So the importance of that is that we know what the quality of the lithium brine and the grades and the chemistry of the material is that's coming out of this salar. So when we look at our area, which is close by, it's a short bow in terms of looking at what we may find from exploration. And in terms of where our focus lies, we've recently undertaken a geophysics program on this area here. We did that as well, but these were the 2 areas that we focused on. And the importance of geophysics in terms of lithium brine exploration is that it essentially looks at electrical conductivity below the surface. And the highly conductive areas in this terrain point to the presence of aquifers, and it's the aquifers that host the lithium brine. So when you do the geophysics, you run the wires, and then you get the current running over the surface, and it penetrates below the ground. You're looking for the signature that's coming up from underneath. So we've run 2 rounds of geophysics on our ground. This yellow line, these 4 lines that we did those in October, and we got some really interesting signatures that came along this area here. So through our joint venture partner, we were able to secure this additional area on the adjacent boundary, and then we ran some additional geophysics to align with the previous lines. And what we've got is a really interesting unit that sits here. If we look at it in more detail, what that points to is these highly conductive zones that go right the way through those geophysical lines. And you can see the numbers here, they sort of line up with the lines on the previous slide. In terms of size, this is about 3 kilometres, this area, by about 250 metres, and then this is 6 kilometres along the whole stretch. So it's a reasonable sized target, and it runs just from below surface. So in terms of lithium brine exploration, this is as good a guide as you've got in terms of putting a drill hole in the ground in this terrain. We've got highly conductive units which are indicative of lithium brines. It doesn't mean they're lithium brines, but it's a good indicator. So in terms of our immediate priority, and this is the value inflection point that I was referring to, we're about to undertake a drill program and put 2 holes into these targets, and that should be happening in the next 4 to 6 weeks. In terms of some of the other areas, whilst the Salar West is our primary focus initially, we're not just a one-trick pony. We've got a couple of other really good prospects. This one we're very excited by. It's 11,500 hectare area around the Salar de Pacanales. we think this has excellent potential, again, to host brines. And our next piece of work will be to do the geophysics. So that's something that we'll do in the near term. And we have another area which we call the Natalie claim. It's a small area, but we know that there's lithium in this area. Samples that have been taken on the surface of this salar have given readings over 300 parts per million. And just to put that in context, the grades of lithium that you see in a lot of the Argentinian projects, which a lot of ASX and TSX companies are focused on, and the economics are solid, are in the range of 200 to 800 parts per million. What we see at the Atacama Salar, where Salar West is grades of upwards of 1,800 parts per million. So that's why it's regarded as being, one of the highest lithium grade areas in the world. This here, at 300 parts per million on the surface, is diluted water. So that points to the potential for much higher grade material below the surface. In terms of our work program, as I mentioned, the drilling, which is to come in the very near term, we'll then look to quickly put a resource and a JORC estimate around that, and then geophysics in the other areas. This is about essentially creating value and optionality in these projects. I mean, we're a small guy. We'll keep these projects moving on a pathway towards development, but at the end of the day, we won't necessarily be the company that does the development. We're about creating value and building value for our investors. In terms of our partner, I mentioned that the importance of having a strong partner for a small player like ourselves gives us a lot of leverage into a country. You can't go into somewhere like Chile or South America and expect to operate on remote control because it's just too far away. You've got to have reliable and trustworthy people on the ground, and that's what we've sought with our partnership. We're also very encouraged by their ability to deliver further projects into the company, and we've already seen that in terms of what we've got. When we initially signed a heads of agreement, we had half the area that we have now. So, there's great scope to add to the mix, but we believe that with the mix that we have now, there's excellent potential to create value. And then in terms of the deal that we've done, we think that we've done an extremely sharp deal, and it really allows us to leverage into what is a highly value creative opportunity for a very modest investment. In terms of our board, there's a lot of experience that sits across the board. We don't sort of run a lot of infrastructure in our company. We try and sort of leverage experience and then try and channel our funds into the ground. I'm here with my chairman, who's also at the table for the next couple of days, so we'd be more than happy to chat to as many of you as possible. So in summary, there are 3 or 4 sort of key elements that we consider make this, a strong investment proposition. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be paying dividends in the near term, but this is about the opportunity to leverage up with very limited downside. And the reason for that is that we have a low market value, as we are, and we're come a big program in terms of the opportunity to re-rate the company, which the drilling really has the potential to do that. And it'll be interesting because Tyson, who speaks in, I think, a couple of presentations' time, he's actually run some numbers around what is the potential value of the Salar West opportunity that we have, should we get some good results. So I encourage you to stay and to listen to that, because I was very encouraged when I heard what those numbers were. Look, in terms of the company, we have cash. We're not looking for a capital raising at the moment. We're funded through our drill program. We have an option series that expires in June 2019, so shortly, but we're looking to extend that for another 6 months. And that effectively represents a 2 cent raising for us, or a $7 million raising, within the next 6 months, which for an explorer is important because you consume rather than create, and we think that that gives us what we need to really take this forward. So thanks very much, and I look forward to chatting to you.